Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our candidate forums. My name is Amy McGuffin. I'm the CEO President of Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce, and we are so grateful to have a partnership with the League of Women Voters to bring this candidate forum with you today. We also want to say thank you to our host, City of Ellensburg and Hal Holmes. We really appreciate you offering the space for us to use tonight. We had a candidates forum last night up in Kirkham, so I think the candidates are ready to rock and roll tonight. Our moderator, as you had heard when he asked you to take your seats, is Paul Jewell, and he will be moderating and going over some rules and guidelines both for you as onlookers and also the candidates tonight. So please enjoy the process, and hopefully you can make a sound decision at the ballot.
Thanks, Amy. How about a quick round of applause for our Executive Director? Well, welcome everybody. I am Paul Jewell, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I have a couple of things I'd like to go over just really quickly. Our program length tonight will be anywhere from about 90 minutes to 120. That really just depends on audience participation. You do have the ability to provide questions. That's your level of participation. Let me be really clear about that. The moderator, that's myself, will ask the questions, but we do have some cards in the back. If you have specific things that you'd like to ask the candidates, you can submit those anytime throughout the process, throughout the program. We'll be bringing those forward and asking those questions of the candidates. Your specific question may not get asked if it's close or it's very similar to another one, because we'll do some consolidating there, but there's an opportunity for you to participate in that way. I will be as I mentioned before, I'll be the moderator and I'll be asking the questions of all the candidates this evening. We do have several questions that we've already prepared that the candidates, I believe, have not seen, so we'll start with those. Candidates will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll get right to that in just a few minutes. And as you can see, their names are up there on the table for your reference as well. We will have opening statements by the candidates as we begin tonight. The order that we'll go in is really just the order from left to right. It'd be from your left to right across the stage. So we'll start with Herion all the way through to Patricia. Is it Todd? I can't quite see it, Patricia.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll put my glasses on in just a minute. They're for sight distance, and when I'm trying to read the notes here, I can't see them. So, as far as questions go, each candidate, for their opening statement, they'll have 90 seconds, but for answers to questions, they'll have 60. Rebuttals are allowed in our format if a candidate wants to rebut a previous statement by their opponent. I just need to know by showing me that your desire to do so by raising your hand. Rebuttals are not unlimited. So for instance, Mr. Herion, if you get the first question, Mr. Mills will have the opportunity to rebut your answer. He'll get 30 seconds for that rebuttal. You then can rebut Mr. Mills' answer as well, again for 30 seconds, and then that's the end of that question. All right, so just to be really clear, one rebuttal by each candidate, no more than one. Let's see, other things for you to know. As far as audience participation, I just want everybody to be aware we'll be recording this on television for later broadcast this evening. So please, as members of the audience, minimize or eliminate disruptions. In fact, no reaction is probably the best reaction as far as television goes. We ask the audience to please be respectful of all the candidates and not disruptive as far as this process goes. Candidates are please asked to limit your answers to the questions that are posed. You're not allowed to interrupt one another. And if you do, I will interrupt you. So let's keep that to a minimum, if at all. Each question must relate to one subject only. Candidates are also asked to refrain from leveling accusations, charges, or attacks of a personal nature, or that are irrelevant to the office or issues pertaining to the office for which you seek. Personal attacks will be treated as disruptive behavior. There is a process here for dealing with disruptive behavior. I don't think we're going to have to deal with that tonight, but if we do, we'll go over that. And the moderator, that's me, is in charge with enforcing all the rules. I've met all of you. You're all really nice people. I'm sure that enforcement won't be a problem. And I think that's it. Are there any questions about the rules from the candidates before we get started? Okay, let's move directly in then to your opening statements. Mr. Herion, we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself and explain why you're running for office and what you plan to accomplish in the first year if elected.
Good evening. My name is Herion. I'm running for Kittitas County Superior Court Judge, position number 1. I'm running because it's in step with my 27 years of service to our country, state, and county. My journey began in the United States Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. I stepped on the yellow footprints, raised my right hand, solemnly swore to defend and uphold the Constitution and obey all lawful orders of the President of the United States. I've served under every president since Bill Clinton. I'm still in service. I continue to serve as a JAG officer in the United States Army Reserves, pursuing a master's degree in strategic studies at the United States Army War College. I served as your serious, violent criminal prosecutor for Exemple's office for 7.5 years. I served as your special assistant attorney general for 8 years, representing Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services, Child Protective Services. Currently, I'm assigned counsel, the Office of Civil Legal Aid, served as a public defender, judge pro tem, voluntary commitment attorney. I'm a board member of the Clymer Museum of Art. John Clymer, born and raised in Ellensburg, as a United States Marine. I'm slightly attracted to him. I served as Kittitas County Board President, Bar Association President, served on the Ellensburg City Council, 4-H. My wife, 4 children, present here in the audience. We now have 1 newly minted adult. 24 years of legal practice. I'm ready to raise my right hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills, before you do your opening statement, I did forget to mention that Darby, who's right here in front here, will be our timer today. You'll notice that there's a time clock right next to her. She'll also be raising her paddles at different points to let you know when you have 30 seconds left or when it's time to stop. Just want to thank you for your service, Darby, this evening. Mr. Mills, go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Matt Mills. I'm running for Superior Court, position 1. I'm currently one of your deputy prosecuting attorneys. I've been in that position for about 5 years, a little over 5 years. Prior to that, I worked 10 years in private practice, and during private practice, I did pretty much everything almost everything a Superior Court judge can see on his docket. Family law, custody hearings, business disputes, landlord-tenant, creditor-debtor, consumer protection. Short a wide variety of Superior Court judge practices, over 2 states, a dozen counties, 3 federal districts, dozens of trial court judges. Personally, I also married for 24 years and have 4 kids. That's a theme with 3 males here at least. Things I do outside of my law practice. I'm a youth sports coach, basketball, baseball. I've been a Cub Scout master for several years, since before we moved up here. I was on the board of Holly Ridge in Kitsap County, which is a facility that deals with adults and children who have disability. My wife and I are currently working on a big project. We're trying to convert some land into a retreat center for kids and families with disabilities to be able to spend some time outside. That's the kind of service-oriented person I am, and I think that's the kind of service I can bring to the bench.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Kirkham.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you to the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce, League of Women Voters in the city for having this forum. Who am I? What have I done? I've done a number of things. I've been a defense attorney, I've been a litigant, I've been a family law attorney, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a Kittitas County Superior Court commissioner. And for those who don't know, a commissioner is somebody who is like a judge, only they hear the majority of cases that a Superior Court judge does, but if somebody doesn't like their decision, they can say, hey judge, look at this and see if I made the right one. I've been doing that for the last 18 months. What I plan on doing, if elected in the first year, is first taking stock of exactly what the position is. There is so much more to the position that I've learned in the last 18 months doing the job that you can't just go in and start making changes without considering all of the ramifications, working with all of the stakeholders, and making sure that you are firm in how you want to go. In the last 18 months, I've made some changes already. I've gotten printers in the courtroom for the judges. We started drafting orders straight from the bench rather than handwriting some of them. There will be a lot to do. We're losing 2 judges, which has never happened in Kittitas County. We need some judicial leadership that I'm prepared to provide, and we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And our second candidate for position 2 is Ms. Todd.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Todd, and I'm running for Superior Court for 3 reasons. Before I share those reasons, I also want to thank our gracious host and you. Thank you, everyone live who's here. Thank you for those people that will be listening. So getting back to those 3 reasons, the first is I have complex civil experience. As senior counsel, I represented cases involving $100 million of risk where my client paid nothing. I helped my client recover $22 million when the Skagit River Bridge collapsed. I have the kind of specialized, complex civil experience that could bring the highest caliber to Kittitas County. Number 2, I've been a full-time prosecutor and defense attorney. Currently, I serve as one of your deputy prosecuting attorneys. I am in the criminal division, prosecuting felony cases, mostly drug and violence. I also have the opportunity and the real privilege of serving as the prosecutor, Greg Zempel's representative on the drug court team. The drug court team is led by Judge Hooper, Vicki Strickland from Merritt, Eileen Murphy from the Office of Public Defense, representatives from the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office, and I mention their names because none of this gets done without teamwork. Teamwork's very important. All of the skills that you hear from these well-qualified judges are because we're on effective teams. And the last thing that separates me is my vast knowledge of criminal and civil procedure, because I'm in a courthouse routinely. I hope to continue that practice as a Superior Court judge for all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Well, as a few of you mentioned, Kittitas County Kittitas County Superior Court's at a bit of a crossroads with this election. This is the first time that I can remember, and maybe ever, where really at the end of this term, we'll have 2 brand new elected judges in Superior Courts. The bench will be all new judges. With that in mind, what specific experiences and qualifications make you the best candidate for this position? And we're going to start with position 2 this time, and we're going to start with Ms. Todd.
My specific qualifications and experiences. As senior counsel, I managed over 100 individuals. These were legal assistants and attorneys. So I know what it means to have a budget, to work hard, and to bring out the best in people. I've also had the opportunity of being in nearly every courthouse from Bellingham, Washington, all the way to Vancouver, Washington. I've appeared in front of some really incredible judges. I have a background in economics and public policy I earned from Central Washington University. So when I look to see how can I contribute in a legal way, I've earned my Juris Doctorate from Gonzaga, and coupled with my background in economics and public policy, I'm looking at efficiencies. How can we serve you all in a fair, transparent, and efficient way? The kind of qualifications I bring, lastly, you should know, is I'm a hard worker. I consider myself a great teammate, and I will continue to work hard with all of the individuals that make our court system work.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. I started out going to Gonzaga, had a practice that I built up from nothing with a partner over there, and it was very successful. Moved back to Ellensburg, where I called home, went to Ellensburg High School back in 2008, and built up another law firm. In the last 18 months, I have been on the bench already. I went to Judicial College as a Superior Court Commissioner. I went to 2 separate judicial conferences, and I've made the connections that are going to be necessary to lead on the bench next year, having 2 open seats and losing that institutional knowledge. Connections are very important. Being able to bring together all of the stakeholders. Being on the bench is so much more than just calling balls and strikes. It's bringing all of the stakeholders together, trying to make policy decisions that affect everybody, that improve community safety. Drug court's a great program. The behavioral health court's a great program. I'd like to see that expand into Superior Court as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Let's go ahead and move to position 1. Same question, and we're going to start this round of questions with Mr. Mills.
So I think that with losing 2 judges, it's going to be a lot like starting your own practice up. where in the sense that, I mean, there's going to be 50, 60-hour weeks that the two new judges are going to have to put in to figure out how to run their courtrooms. As far as some other qualifications, I did help get behavioral health court off the ground. Mr. Zempel put me in charge of helping launch that program in district court. That is something I would like to see, also like to see expanded into felony level misdemeanor, felony level mental health court. I think these kind of therapeutic courts save the community money in the long run and save lives, so that's important. And also, just being a prosecutor for the last 5 years, prosecutors have a special position under the rules of professional conduct. They have to not only look out for the interests of the people of the state of Washington, but they also have to look out for the constitutional interests of the defendants. That's something that I've already started doing.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Herion.
Skills or attributes do I have? Practiced law in Washington for 24 years, the majority of which has been in Superior Court, the position that we're seeking. My second most important component is my military service. I've spent 17 years, United States Army Reserve JAG Corps. I believe enhances my qualifications. In the JAG Corps, you look over rules of engagement, national security law, international law, Hague Convention, administrative law, and court martials. And that's within the span as a reservist of those 24 years. I think the coupling of them is a value added for the bench. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Just want to remind the audience once again that we are collecting additional questions. If you have specific questions that you're interested in asking the candidates, go ahead and fill out a card in the back and submit it to the staff back there. We're going to move on to another discussion here about priorities. Obviously, when you have a big change like this in an office, especially one as important as the Superior Court, it presents a lot of opportunities for change. It also might present an opportunity for a lot of consistency. Let's talk about your priorities. What are the top 3 priorities or issues that you think you want to address or will address if elected? And how do you plan to tackle them? We're going to go back to position 1 to start this question, and we're going to start with Mr. Herion. We'll start with Mr. Herion. I think that's the correct order. Thank you.
Thank you. What are my top 3 priorities? None. You're electing a Superior Court judge. You can hold court right here. We could set it up, start the case, and it could happen here. I'm not running for legislative office. I'm not running to be a county commissioner. I'm running to serve as your next Superior Court judge. It really is a leadership position. I have 3 key messages, though. First, I vow to uphold, promote the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary. Second, consistent with the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, ensure no person is deprived of life, liberty, property without due process of law, or denied the equal protection of the laws. And third, I believe it's a function as a Superior Court judge to set the tone and the decorum in the courtroom. And that's really what your judge brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills?
There's a lot of opportunities here with 2 new judges. It's a problem, but it's an opportunity. It is the judge's job to make decisions on the bench, but the judge is also running an elected office. We have things that need to be addressed. Modernization of the courtroom, working with the clerk's office perhaps to get some kind of paperless system to be more efficient. I think the first thing that a new judge has to do is sit down, look at the local rules, see if some of them aren't being enforced. We need to start enforcing them to speed things up. As I've been knocking on doors, I've heard people say, why is it taking me 30 grand and 2 years to get a divorce in this county? That's a good question. Something like mandatory mediation, which a lot of counties that I practice and have might be a good idea. These are things that we need to look at. We need to do an evaluation of how we can make this a better court for the people of Kittitas County. And it's a great big opportunity to do this in the next few years.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Same question to our candidates for position 2, and I believe we're going to start this round with Mr. Kirkham.
Thank you. 3 probably pretty important priorities, and I think it goes without saying that all 4 of these candidates, myself included, have honor and integrity. They're going to uphold the Constitution and try and do the best job that they can. But our court is getting into a position, and it's statewide, it's nationwide, and we're kind of behind the times a little bit. We're facing an attorney shortage. We see an attorney shortage when we're trying to get attorneys appointed to parents on minor guardianships, trying to find guardian ad litems, trying to find different attorneys to represent kids in ARYs. This is an issue that needs taken care of right away. If the Supreme Court does what they've indicated they may do, and recently at judicial conference they indicated they hadn't made a decision, and they lower caseload limits, we're going to have a severe shortage. I would also look at access to justice and efficiency.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And Ms. Todd, round things out.
The three priorities that I have, number one is serve you. Superior Court judges do an astounding amount of work. I've seen Judge Hooper and Judge Spark work around the clock. They could be signing warrants way into the evening hours and back at court 8 a.m. ready to go. That's priority one, is serve all the current needs that we have. Priority two, looking at efficiency. We spend time in the courtroom in front of a judge, too much of it on scheduling some things that can be done not in a courtroom. Certain things we must schedule with all the parties present that affect constitutional rights. We can take a closer look at what we're spending court time doing and use our judges for substantive decision making and see where we can save on some of those scheduling decisions. And lastly, I'm looking at cost saving measures. You heard some ideas about paperless things. The Administrative Office of the Court has a business services division. They have tools and strategies to increase efficiency and decrease costs. I would use all those tools.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. I think we can all agree that position of Superior Court Judge is a pretty critical position to the law and justice system, and a very important position in our community. I think we can all agree that it takes a lot of skill to be a judge, to run a courtroom, to run the judicial system and all the behind-the-scenes work, and certainly to sit in judgment of whether people have violated the law. With that in mind, talk about what you feel is the most important skill or attribute for a judge, right? And give us an example of a time when you believe you've demonstrated that skill or attribute. We're going to start with our position 2 candidates, so we're back to you this time.
The top quality that your judge needs, they need to be fair. Without a doubt, you need to feel that you've been fully heard. That's one way a judge can demonstrate fairness. To be fully prepared. When I've been in front of judges who have thoroughly read the briefing, they have the experience and the temperament to deliver hard decisions, that's how litigants feel fair. You're not always going to get your way. You know, half the time someone leaving the courtroom is not happy with what happened. We need our judges to be fair. I have 16 years as a public servant. I've been in practice for 18. 16 of those years have been serving citizens of Washington for the Attorney General's office. And through that, I must perform fairly. Even if I could win, I still had to follow all the rules. I had to think of not just my client agency I was representing, but also the state as a whole. It requires big picture thinking. It requires complex experiences. It requires a commitment to public service.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Same question, Mr. Kirkham.
Well, after doing the job for 18 months and dealing with a lot of unrepresented and pro se litigants, patience is probably the most important attribute. Fairness goes without saying. Impartiality goes without saying. All of our elected judges need to be impartial. They need to be fair. But they need to have the patience to allow people to present their case. Kittitas County is a little unique in how it's always been run, and some changes do need made. We do need a court administrator to help unrepresented litigants get before the court and make sure that they're heard. But as a judge, being able to take the time, whether you have the time or not, and figure it out, be creative. Oftentimes in the last 18 months, even Monday, I had a 10:30 docket that ran partway into noon. We wrote for the clerks to take a break, reset it at 4. Juvenile docket ran late. We went till 5:20 to make sure that everybody got heard.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. All right, let's move to our position 1 candidates. We'll start this time with Mr. Mills, I believe, and the same question.
So obviously listening, being fair, important attributes, but I think the ability to integrate a large amount of information. And sometimes you see a big brief with hundreds of citations in it. It's the judge's job to go through, make sure that the law is being decided as what said it's in there. Taking the law, integrating the facts of appropriate cases, being able to assess who has credibility, who doesn't have credibility, in certain cases anyway. And my previous career was, I worked in biotech, my degrees in biochemistry, and part of what I did is process data. And I think that to some extent there's some kind of crossover there. There's a lot of data coming in as a judge. Case law, facts, arguments from lawyers, just being able to take that and come to a coherent decision that you can explain and that the Court of Appeals can look at and understand how you got there is an important attribute. I think I do have that.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And then final candidate for this question is Mr. Herion.
For this question, I look to Thomas Jefferson. He looked at our system as to be a judge, is to fairly impartially hear such case before the court, ensure orderly judicial proceedings, rendered reasonable rulings based upon objective rationale. His direct quote, untethered to subjective experience. It doesn't go without saying, having an even temperament, being empathetic, being understanding. It's truly a balancing act. I would argue that a component of serving as a Superior Court judge is certainly being at the right age, stage in life, with the requisite amount of knowledge, experience, life experience. I mean, these are people's lives that come before you each day, and understanding that is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Let's change gears just a little bit. Several of you have alluded to or outright mentioned workload and the commitment and the fact that being a judge isn't necessarily a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 sort of job. In fact, you might have to give a little bit more or a lot more in order to make it work, especially given the fact that we're in such a significant point of change in the Superior Court's office. So with that in mind, talk about your personal motivation. What motivated you to pursue a career in the judiciary? Now we're going to start back with position 1 and Mr. Herion.
What motivated me is, as I stated in my opening, it's in keeping with the level of service I provided. And as just previously stated, I think timing is everything. Everybody here has acknowledged we have 2 positions that are vacating. I didn't necessarily think I would run, but when both positions came available, I did think I was at the right age and stage and level of experience to offer something. Would I have felt that back in 2000? No. 2001? No. I was thinking about the World Trade Center and what was going on. 2010? No. But now, yes. And I also strongly believe that the judicial branch must serve as the backstop to ensure that amid the noise and haste that we see and hear out there, that the judge upholds the rule of law.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills.
The easy answer to that is why I'm pursuing this position is because I think I'd be good at it. I know that sounds a little trite, but there are plenty of good lawyers who will freely admit they would make bad judges because they are all in it about advocacy. Why do I think I'd be good at it? I think I have the right amount of experience, the right temperament, the right ability to listen to people, to empathize with people. When these positions, when it was clear there was going to be 2 positions, I started thinking about it. I asked around a little bit and got some backup. People said, yeah, I think you would be a decent judge. And I collected some endorsements that said the same thing. Kittitas County is a fantastic place to live. I've loved serving as a deputy prosecutor for 5 years, and I think this is the position where I can help maintain that community for people and keep it a great place to live.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Let's go ahead and move on to our position 2 candidates, and I believe we start this round with Mr. Kirkham.
Thank you. I think Mr. Herion kind of hit the nail on the head with this a little bit, age and stage. If you asked me 10 years ago if I ever wanted to be a judge, I would have said no. But over the last 20 years, I've had a career that I've pretty much done everything that I think I possibly could do as a defense attorney. There's a lot more I could do in some civil arenas, but I've done quite a bit in that as well. But I've spent 20 years giving back to the community, and the community has done a ton for me. I've always believed in serving the community and working with young lawyers and working with interns. One thing I realized is that I think I could do more. I think I could do more on the bench and affect more change and affect more better representation for everybody and access to justice than I could do as an attorney. I'm a known quantity. I've been here for 15 years, 17 years, the last time around before I moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Ms. Todd.
I feel a calling to serve. It's that simple. I've been in public service for 16 years, and while I've been practicing for 18, a lot has been invested in me. I've worked with brilliant attorneys. I've worked with some lesser attorneys too. I've worked with brilliant judges and some not brilliant judges. I have had so many wonderful trial experiences dealing with difficult legal issues that I want to give back. Ellensburg, Kittitas County has invested so much in me. When I first came in 1996, I knew I would be here forever. And I met my husband, fell in love here, proposed at Menashtash, married at the First Christian Church, and then I went off to the Peace Corps because I thought, well, I don't want to get a real job yet. I want to serve. Service has been part of my mentality. I went to get a law degree at Gonzaga University, and then I began as quickly after doing criminal defense work for a couple years, and then public service as a senior counsel for the Attorney General, and then most recently as a deputy prosecuting attorney. I wish to serve you. That's what calls me to the judiciary.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. I'll just remind the audience, maybe fair warning, we're halfway through the predetermined questions. So you still have a few minutes if you're interested in asking any specific questions. I'll remind you there are no cards in the back where you can kind of fill that out. Remember that whatever question that you present will be presented to all 4 candidates. All right, let's shift gears a little bit again. So, we've talked about your experience and your qualifications. We've talked about your priorities and your skills and what motivates you. At the end of the day, the court system is all about the law, right? And I think several of you mentioned the rule of law, impartiality, and how important it is to be a judge in those that's capable of doing those things. But at the end of the day, it's still people that run the system, right? This is a people-based system. Without people, we don't have justice in many instances here in our country, in our state. And I'm talking about specifically, of course, the jury, right? The jury is made up specifically of people. People management can be challenging sometimes, right? For all kinds of reasons. So let's talk about jury management. What actions would you take if a jury seemed to be struggling to reach a verdict? I believe we are starting again with position 2, if I'm not mistaken. That's on the rotation, and it's back to you, Ms. Todd, for the first answer.
I think you want to look at 2 things when a jury is struggling. You're going to use your common sense. You're first going to look at what about the environment can we control? What time of day is it? How long have they been at it? Are there ways that we can provide a more comfortable jury experience? Many of you know our courthouse was built in 1955. It served as half the courthouse, half a jail facility. It has grown exponentially. There's even county offices outside that need to be part of our service. So you're going to look at the environment. How can I help the jurors? But then you look carefully at the law. And thankfully, the Washington Practice Guide gives us a script, judges a script, believe it or not, to help jurors understand, to go back and read the instructions. Also, sometimes jurors are at a point where they just can't decide, and you can follow the law and work those steps with them too. Requires you to couple both your common sense and the law. It's exactly what judges would do. It is not easy, but we need to think of jurors first as people.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham?
Well, these are tough questions. One, because there's not a whole lot you can do to interfere with a jury's verdict or their deliberation under the law and under the Constitution, and to a certain extent, that's the way it should be. In Washington, it would be improper for a judge to try and cajole a jury to reach a verdict. It would be improper for a judge to interfere in their deliberations. However, as Ms. Todd pointed out, there are some things that can be done. COVID actually helped a little bit with this and comfort for the jury, because rather than the big table and the hard wooden chairs, the court actually put comfortable chairs with little desks in the jury room and started providing snacks and water and make sure the jury's comfortable. The one thing that you can do is make a decision, have they been deliberating enough? But the jury system is constitutional and we can't interfere. We can just help.
Thank you. Let's move back to our position 1 candidates. And I keep forgetting, but I think it's actually Mr. Mills. I think it's your turn to go first.
So, yeah, this is a hard question. A couple of years ago, 18 months ago, I ran into kind of a string of hung juries, I think 2 or 3 in a row. So this is something I became very familiar with in a short period of time. With Judge Hooper. And there's specific things we can't do, can't do. I think at least once Judge Hooper asked them to continue deliberating. And it's something I think that a seasoned judge with 2 seasoned attorneys on either side kind of know it when you see it, and the jury's not going to get there. But you're right, it's nothing, a judge got to be really careful about encouraging a verdict if one's not going to otherwise be made. We don't want them to come to a verdict just to go home. So there's a lot of case law that just needs to be followed, and the attorneys have some input on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And then finally, Mr. Herion.
My role model for jury trials was, many of you may remember, Judge Mike Cooper. I thought he set a good tone in the courtroom. He didn't say a whole lot, which said a whole lot. And he certainly, as my colleagues have indicated, didn't intervene, or attempt to influence a jury. Can't do that. But I think he had a good sense of what was going on when to push, to encourage, because there's a real human component. And making the jury feel comfortable, because they might have a very, very serious case before them and feel the heavy weight and burden of making that decision. And making them feel that you're doing your duty. You're following the law and the evidence that was introduced, and you can reach this verdict. And if they can't, then it's declared a mistrial.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. So I think a lot of us, when we think of what life is like as a judge, biggest reference might be TV shows like Law and Order, right? So being a judge is lots of slamming of the gavel and ruling on objections by the defense or by the prosecutor of what the other attorney said, or rendering verdicts, or calling the attorneys to a sidebar at the bench for a good scolding, right? That's like 98% of being a judge. That's not true. Most of it is behind the scenes, right? The case management stuff, all that hard work that happens that nobody sees. So let's talk about that for just a minute. Some of you have started to touch on this a little bit, but we'd like you to go into some more detail. Specifically, once you're done pounding your gavel and scolding the other attorneys in sidebar, what steps would you take to improve the efficiency of court proceedings, and even more specifically, reduce case backlogs in Kittitas County? Now, we're going to go back to position 1 and Mr. Herion for the first answer.
Well, I'll tell you, before I was actually taken away from the San Diego airport to go to MCRD, they were playing A Few Good Men before a drill sergeant came in and took us away. And I remember watching it that time. Of course, I'm focused on the Marine Corps and thinking, wow, this movie's amazing. I mean, is that what an attorney does? You know, I think that's what I want to do too. And I can tell you, it's not even remotely like that. However, what can a judge practically do on the bench? Some of it's already been mentioned by my colleagues, which is you push cases along. Certainly continuances are needed, but a judge sets the tone. There are judges that aren't as decisive as other judges. Some are indecisive. Some perhaps are too decisive. But the tone you set and how you want to manage your docket to move cases along can greatly aid the matters. If an attorney wants to make a motion, they file it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills.
Yeah, I think practicing a little bit in federal court, we have some hard and fast deadlines. I'm not suggesting that state court should be like that because it's a different caseload. The federal courts have much lower caseload. But I do think that we maybe have gotten away, especially in this county, from setting deadlines like and holding parties to them. I know I'm as guilty as any other prosecutor. I have other stuff to do. Let's kick this case down the road a little bit. The defense attorneys agree with us. But I think that just encourages attorneys to do that. I think if we get some kind of guidelines, what a judge expects to see as far as moving cases along, I think would be helpful. And then just, efficiency. Like I said, looking at the rules, what can we do to move the dockets along a little bit better would be a big help.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Let's move on to our position 2 candidates. We'll start with Mr.
All right, thank you. Well, being on the bench for 18 months, we've already been looking at that and talking about it and seeing what could be done. Currently, many of the dockets are on Monday, the civil, the family law, the general civil docket, as well as protection orders, the juvenile docket, the RY docket. That's a lot of dockets for one day. Even with 2 judges working all day, oftentimes we've had to work through lunch or go past 5. We've considered moving the juvenile docket to Wednesday. I think that's appropriate. I think that we need to have more dockets during the week and utilize the judges that we have and the courtrooms that we have. Yes, we have an old courtroom. Yes, we need that building rebuilt. There have been plans to do that. That's years down the road, even if the current plans are accepted. But what we really need to do is look at case management as a whole, not just one particular type of case. And bear in mind, the clerk is an elected official who runs their department too. It's different from the judge.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And rounding out this question, Ms. Todd again.
When you think about increasing efficiency and decreasing backlog, we aren't the first county to face these struggles. We can use tools that the Office of the Administrative Court has. They have Superior Court Judges Associations. There are other counties who face similar situations. We can see what's worked in other places, and we can look carefully at, are we using the most efficient tools? Are there better online tools? Are there better ways to have it? And as you look at those, you want to get the great minds of your fellow colleagues. You want to ask the clerk, the elected clerk, her team. You want to ask the prosecutors, the civil bar. You want to find out from the CASAs, from the guardian items. Getting great intel is going to help us make better, efficient decisions the more minds we get on the problem. When you think about decreasing backlog, we need to start identifying why is a continuance needed. Is it just something that's getting kicked down a schedule, or is there a reason? Because keep in mind, judges only know what the parties bring to them. Judges can ask those poignant questions to find out why.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. So this next question is a little broader, but it's also probably pretty personal to each of you. When you think about a civil society like we have, and the legal system that we have lots of rules, lots of procedures, lots of technical things that have to be done in a certain way. There's a system, right, in place that people rely on for things to happen. But for a civil society to really believe in justice, they have to have trust in the system. Right? They have to have belief in the system that it's going to deliver the right outcome. And a lot of that sits on the shoulders of the judge. Being a judge in a society like the United States is a sacred responsibility. Judges are expected to maintain the highest of ethical standards. How do you ensure that you live up to those high ethical standards, maintain impartiality, and avoid conflicts of interest in your role as a judge? I think we're starting again with position 2 and Ms. Todd.
This is a great question because at the core of it, judges are people too. And so when you think about how are you going to be an effective judge, how are you going to maintain your impartiality, the first thing you need to do is you need to take care of yourself. You need to get good rest. You need to have good nutrition. You need to have outlets, whatever those are, spiritual outlets, recreational outlets. That's really important for being a good judge. You also need to stay connected to your community. There's lots of ways that we can all serve our community. When I think about upholding the highest ethical standard, it's not just following the law. It's making sure 2 things. 1, you are actually following the law, and 2, you appear to be following the law. And to do that, you need to surround yourself with people who give you honest feedback, who people will tell you hard truths, and you need to be maintaining an open door to hear those things. This is not an easy endeavor that any of us have chosen. That's why your decision is so critical.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham, your response.
Well, that's something that I've struggled with for the last 18 months because I'm in a position currently where I'm a practicing attorney as well as I'm on the bench as a Superior Court Commissioner. And it's something that I've had to answer many a time over. I think one of the biggest things on the bench is transparency. Identifying any potential conflicts, but also being very open about any even appearance of conflicts. It's not just conflicts that we have to worry about, but what is it going to appear like? How is it going to look? It's not just making sure that we're practicing with integrity and on the bench with integrity, but that it appears that way as well. I believe that Ms. Todd hit the nail on the head as well. Work-life balance is important. There's been a lot of talk about 50-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks, but you're not going to be as effective, you're not going to be as ethical, as good, and work as hard if you're burnt out, if you're not taking care of yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Let's move to position 1, and we'll start this time with Mr. Mills.
When I first got to Ellensburg, I can't remember who it was from the prosecutor's office. It might have been now Judge Juris, I think, who said, remember, you're back in a small town, everyone's watching you. And they know who you are, and they know that you're in the prosecutor's office, and that's going to reflect on the system as a whole. And I've even told my kids, like, hey, what you do reflects on me, which reflects on the prosecutor's office, which reflects on the judicial system, which, you know, maybe was a bit much for a 13-year-old, but it's true. I think what a judge can do is be the same ethical person on the bench as they are when they're coaching a Little League team, you know, not yelling at the ref or being polite in the parking lot at Fred Meyer. You know, just little things just to build trust and make sure people know, okay, this is our representative in the judicial system. He seems to be conducting himself appropriately. He probably does that on the bench too, and leading by example is probably the #1 thing we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And Mr. Herion?
When I filed, the first decision I had to make was how was I going to fund my campaign. And that's why I decided to run a 100% self-funded grassroots campaign based upon the 16 years I've served in the community. Because this is a different type of job. It's not a political office. It's a nonpartisan job. And perception can become reality. When our longtime 20-year sheriff, Gene Dana, endorsed me, he contacted me. I didn't solicit his endorsement. When CW Police Chief, Jason Burton Cook, decided to endorse me, he contacted me. When citizens have come up, they've contacted me. It's very delicate in this type of job, but your judge is the center of gravity. And at each stage of my life, whether a son, father, husband, Army officer, Marine, treated with importance, I'll treat the position the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. So, before I ask the next question, again, just remind the audience, this is question number 8. We only have Well, this is we've done question number 8. So we're on question number 9. We only have one left. So if you're sitting there in your chair and you're thinking, man, that last answer made me think of something that I want to ask, now's a great opportunity to go back there and fill out one of those cards. We definitely want to hear your questions. So please, if you have one that you'd like us to ask, go ahead and fill out one of those cards and we'll get to that in just a little while. I believe we're back with position 1, and Mr. Herion, you'll be the first one to respond to this question. Let's talk about representation, and by representation we mean client representation in the courtroom. It's an issue that's been in the news a lot lately, not in the way that I'm going to ask this question, but it has been in the news a lot lately, mostly from a public defense point of view. But this question actually has to do with self-represented litigants. Specifically, what experiences have prepared you to handle an instance or a case involving a self-represented litigant?
Well, I can tell you I've dealt with self-represented litigants as persons who want to represent themselves for 24 years. Fortunately, the experiences have been somewhat infrequent, but the first thing I've always done is, as an attorney, if I'm representing a client, I see the opposing party is unrepresented, is to encourage, and most judges do, encourage the person to retain an attorney. There are times that an individual does not want an attorney, and that is their right. And you have to make sure that their waiver of such is knowing, intelligent, voluntary, and possibly appoint counsel on standby to be available to assist that individual if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills, your response, please.
One of my, I think probably my first assignment out of law school when I went to work for a general practice attorney in Silverdale was he handed me over a business dispute case. We were representing some business partners, and the plaintiff was an unrepresented litigant, pro se guy. And he was pretty good. He did his research, and it was an eye-opening experience because, well, even though he was good, he didn't know all the rules, and so maybe understand that, you know, having an attorney is incredibly valuable. Now, there's a big difference between, or there's a difference anyway between criminal and civil cases. In criminal cases, you know, you have a constitutional right, so if you're waiving that right, you have to do so knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. Whereas if you're getting a divorce or something, it might be just because you can't afford a lawyer. So I think the judge is a little bit in a position where he has to make sure he's fair to both parties, but just encourage representation on the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. We'll move on to our candidates for position 2, and I believe we start with Mr. Kirkham.
Well, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I've been doing it for 18 months. Since COVID, we started streaming court proceedings, and people can appear by WebEx, and there's a lot of self-represented litigants, what we used to refer to as pro se, who appear every Monday. And that's where the earlier answer where I said patience comes in. But as far as what prepares me to do it, I've already been doing it. And one thing that I've realized is that you can't help one over the other. You can't give legal advice, but you certainly can be very open about what the procedures are that are going to be followed. One of the aspects of it that really needs to be honed in is that we're going to have more and more self-represented litigants, and we need to give them some tools. We need to do videos. We need to do how-to packets on guardianships and protection orders and whatnot. The answer is not go get an attorney, because there aren't all that many practicing in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And finally, Ms. Todd.
The two tools that have helped me when I'm interacting with self-represented parties are respect and results. I have 16 years of working with unrepresented parties, and the first is respect. Making sure that each individual knows that these are the rules that apply to everyone, and you're going to conduct yourself in that way. As an attorney with a pro se unrepresented party, it means writing letters that outline what the rules are and taking the extra step as a public servant to provide a copy of the rules. As a judge, that means well documenting what happens in the courtroom, having that exchange, that colloquy with the individual about the risks and the benefits of going pro se. When you think about results, that's the other key difference that has served me well in 16 years, is making sure people are held to that standard because the rules do apply equally, and making sure from the very beginning each person knows what they're expected to perform. Judges can do the same thing by being leaders in the courtroom.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Only a candidate for judge would use the term colloquy for a conversation. I appreciate that. Okay, breathe easy. Breathe easy. You've reached question 10 for the panel of experts. So the really tough questions are next. So this is another softball question for you, so get prepared, okay? I know that you talked a lot about, in answering the previous questions, you've talked a lot about work-life balance, right? You talked about maintaining ethical standards. You talked about how your personal reputation, even maybe your family members' actions and reputations reflect on the judicial system, might reflect on the court in Kittitas County. So this one's about community. Because judges are still members of the community, right? You have to maintain kind of that ethical standard. You are a little mystical to many people, right? In that black robe, but you're still a member of the community. So how do you think judges can still make a positive impact on their communities outside the courtroom? And I think we're back to position 2 with Ms. Todd for the first response.
Happy to answer. How to make a positive impact. Be part of your community. We all have interesting attributes that make us special. I love Lego and puzzle. So I'm gonna sign up for this puzzle challenge that Hall Homes is sponsoring. There are ways that you can still be part of the community, uphold the fairness, the impartiality, and the independence. I have 2 young children, 10 and 12. They can't wait to do the Chamber of Commerce trunk or treat downtown. Last year they said, best Halloween of their whole lives. As my mom heart, my goals were fulfilled. When it comes to being part of our community, this community has opened itself up to all of us. We've all been in wonderful parades. We've experienced Miners Fest up in Liberty. We've gone to the Easton Memorial Parade, Thorpe Community Days, the rodeo, the fair. We have been everywhere. We are going to continue to do that because we all have a real service and a love for the community. That's how you do it. It's simple. Be here where you love, doing the things you love with the people that you love.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham.
Well, it's said that being a judge is somewhat isolating. I think the very nature of it makes it so. Oftentimes, I'll walk into a room and 2 lawyers will stop talking, or I'll walk by somebody and they'll look away and not talk because they have a case in front of me. They're discussing it. I can't be part of that. That's appropriate. Sometimes it feels very isolating, but I would do what I've done for the last 15, 20 years. Instead of sponsoring the Ed Fund fundraiser, I'd attend. I'm still able to attend as a judge. I'm still able to be involved as a judge. I just can't do it to the same level, or a level that somehow would, question impartiality. I can still attend Central football games, even though I'm not sponsoring them up there. I can still attend the high school football games, even though I'm not doing anything to help support the team financially, but I can still be involved. And I can go down and actually work the lines for my kid playing rather than, have to stay away from it.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Let's move to our position 1 candidates with the same question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Mills.
So I have a friend from law school who's a judge in King County right now. He's endorsed me because we've known each other forever. And thinks I'd make a good judge. But he was talking about how this giving me advice probably didn't make much sense because Kittitas ain't King County, as he put it. And I think that's true. I think he can probably go to Bosco and not run into anybody he knows. That's not going to be the case here. I've run into Judge Parks, Judge Hooper in the community, and people know who you are. And again, it just comes back to holding yourself to the highest standard and participate in the community. Like Mr. Kirkham said, we can still do things. I still plan on being a scoutmaster next year if I win, because I think that's a place where I can help that's outside of the legal area. I think that's just being going forth and being yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Herion?
I hope I can stay on the Clymer Board Museum of Art. I love Western art, love John Clymer. My kid's been involved in track and field, high school, cross country. Absolutely love it. Great. All my kids have been in 4-H, Clover Rovers, and we man the booths at the fair. My wife's superintendent, the fiber booth at the fair. I'm not involved in that. But I do like to hang out at the fiber booth. And my son recently, his swim team, East, did a fundraiser at the rodeo, hawking pop in the stands, and I got enlisted in that. And so I do hope I can do that. I'm amazed at the exorbitant price that people are willing to pay for it, but they do, and so I hope I can still walk the stands.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. That price that people pay, is it fair and impartial if it comes from a judge? Just had to throw that in. Okay, so you've been through the 10 predetermined questions from the Chamber of Commerce. Now the real experts are weighing in. And this is a pretty big stack of cards, so I hope you guys are comfortable in those chairs. We're going to be here a while. I want to remind audience members, first of all, thank you for these questions, and there's still time to submit questions if you have any. I will remind some of you that if you asked a question that was specific for one individual candidate, it did not get transferred to me, because the questions need to be written in such a way that it can be asked to all the candidates. So if you were one of those individuals, I will not ask your question because I don't have it. But you can reframe that question and resubmit it. So if you're interested in doing that, please do so. So the first question, are you guys ready? Everybody take a breath. You guys need a moment to get up and stretch? Should we do the hokey pokey for a second? A little more water? Do we have some water for the candidates? So that was a no on the hokey pokey? All right, let's get back to it then. All right, and I think we're starting back with position 1 with Mr. Herion, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of you have referred to the campaign, right, and the non-political nature of the position. But at the end of the day, it is an elected position, right? You do have to run a campaign if you want to be a Superior Court judge, and you have to do it every 4 years in Washington State. So this question is directly related to that. What have you learned through campaigning for this position that you'd like to share?
Yeah, probably the most instructive experience I've had campaigning has been doorbelling. I've received a lot of questions, and I believe in the process. I had a person say, gosh, you probably can't wait to get to November 5th. You have to go through so much. And I said, yeah, but by the same token, the 6-month process that we have to go through, we're going to require attorneys in the courtroom and litigants in the courtroom to go through a process. So we need to go through a process, and I think that individual liked that. I've had questions about am I a Democrat or am I a Republican? I've obviously had to say, it's a nonpartisan position. I know you want to know, but that is the nature of the position. I think the most important component running a campaign is we're all humans. Everybody up here, we're just as human as you. Body, skin, underneath this clothing, and that's who we are.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills, same question.
Working in the prosecutor's office, you get to see a lot of the bad, especially as a criminal DPA. I was apprehensive about going doorbelling. It's like, man, I got to go out and put myself out there and not interrupt people's days. But people at Kittitas County have been fantastic. Usually the worst I get is polite indifference. Once in a while, you get somebody who picks up on something and wants to yell at you about something, which is fine. But just getting to know this community a lot better, even though I thought I knew it pretty well, just from my involvements. But going door to door is an eye-opener. And there's a lot of people who I've realized who don't quite understand how the judicial system works. So that's makes me think we need whoever wins this to get out there a little bit more, outreach, get into schools a little bit, just be available to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Let's move to our position 2 candidates with the same question, and we start with Mr. Kirkham.
All right, thank you. I agree with Mr. Mills. We need to get back to what we used to do, which is have a law day where judges and attorneys go into the schools and educate people. That's one thing I've learned. One thing I've learned is a little bit more personal to me. It's very hard to put yourself out there for public office. It's very difficult. It's daunting. It's not an easy decision. I've learned personally how much support I have. I've been supported by Judge Sparks, who's endorsed me, Don Sparks, who's endorsed me, several other judges and attorneys. Sheriff Clay Myers today endorsed me. I've learned that what my first attorney mentor told me when I went out into private practice, he said, "Don't worry about the money. Do a good job. The rest will take care of itself." And that's what I found. Just be who you are, do a good job, and that support will be there, and I'm very thankful that it is.
Thank you. And Ms. Todd.
I've learned it's an incredible honor to be here. And with every great honor, it is humbling. It's humbling to ask people for their vote. It's humbling to go knock on doors, to stand at the corner of 4th and Pearl and take a morning to all of the individual shoppers at the farmer's market. It is humbling to put your world out there to see if people want to vote for you or not. And it's an incredible honor. It is an honor to be considered with 3 other judicial candidates. Part of our judicial canons are making sure we impart trust in the judiciary. It's a real honor to do it, as much as it's humbling. The same will be said if I get enough votes to be the judge. It will be an honor, but it's also humbling because people are bringing you difficult things. It's also incredibly exhilarating. It's exciting to be here and to share my candidacy. It's also exhausting. I go home at the end of the day after working a full day and then campaigning in the afternoon hours. And what I come to occur at the end of it is there's nothing I would not have rather done. This has been a wonderful experience, and I'm going to be a little bummed, to tell you the truth, when it's over.
Thank you. Thank you. Here I was supposed to be the moderator and tell you to speak directly into the microphone, and I made the same mistake. I apologize. Okay. Next question, and I believe we're starting back with position 2 and Ms. Todd. This is an easy one, super easy. What are you looking forward to the least in taking the bench if you're elected?
Judges are presented difficult questions that don't have easy answers. And in the end of it, sometimes there's harm people that judges can't fix. There's losses, personal loss, there's financial loss, there's emotional loss. That is a lot of humanity at your bench. That is going to be hard. I come from a place where I want solutions and I want to fix things. I won't be able to do the things I could do as an advocate. Instead, I'll be listening carefully to the evidence before me. I will look at the law carefully, and I will give everyone a fair chance. And the way I will do that is provide time for people to talk. Recent studies have shown that just 3 minutes, a litigant who has just 3 minutes even in front of a judge is going to feel more heard than if you short-circuit that time. It's going to be hard to balance the need to listen to everyone and also reach just results, and I'm committed to doing that.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham, your response, please.
What am I looking forward to the least? My own fallibility, the fact that I know mistakes will happen. In the past 18 months, I've made mistakes. I'm human. It's a job that I've learned a tremendous amount from, and I don't make mistakes that I made 12 months ago. And that's why I really appreciate the fact that the commissioner position has a process of revision, where you can go to a judge and say, hey, there's a mistake was made. And some of those have been valid, and some of the judges said no mistakes were made. I did a case that I made a decision based on the information I had at the time, and I think it was the right decision. Judge Sparks agreed that it was the right decision. 9 months later, after GAL's involved, and there's a lot more information, a very different decision was made, and one of the litigants said, well, wait a minute, you decided this back then. And I looked him in the eye and I said, yeah, and we did harm. And we're not going to keep doing that when we have more information.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Let's move to our position 1 candidates for same question, and we'll start with Mr. Mills.
I think probably the thing I'd look forward to the least would be having 3 appellate court judges listening to lawyers who are going to rip apart every decision you make to try to get, if they've lost, to try to get the appellate court to change your decision. It's going to be, I think that's going to take some getting used to, having the appeals court comb through your decisions, and then maybe, God forbid, the Supreme Court of the state or even the country, for that matter, look over your decisions. I think also if anything comes up on a Raj appeal, when Superior Court judges are the first appeal stop for decisions made in district court, that might be kind of hard to do too, I think, because we have some good judges down there, but it's a job I do. It probably wouldn't be the top of my list though. And also, I will miss the people in the prosecutor's office. I've got great relationships over there. Not that I can't still interact with them, but day to day, I miss them.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Herion.
I think I'll feel the gravity of the decisions that have to be made. When Judge Cooper sentenced an individual who committed a serious crime in our community to 58 years to life, I just him saying that, just like, wow. I mean, it's huge. As a JAG officer, one of the most difficult jobs is advising the commander on rules of engagement and targeting, knowing that people are going to die. And you have to weigh it and balance it and assess it. And we do that as a nation. And that's what judges have to do. And as all my colleagues have said, you want to get it right, because you sentence somebody to life in prison, that's a big call. You reduce the sentence, that's a big call. You hold somebody on $1 million bail, that's a huge call, and you want to get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. So let's switch back to some administrative questions. First one, and I believe we're back to position 1, and we'll start with you, Mr. Herion. How do you, and this is one that you've touched on a little bit as a group, but it's getting a little bit more specific. How do you plan to handle the increased use and need of technology in really pretty outdated and aging facility?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we can all remember COVID here, right? And a quote positive of COVID in the court system has been technology. There are more attorneys appearing virtually in our state for preliminary hearings, currently representing children in Benton, Yakima, Yakima, Grant, and Adams counties. I appear virtually for some of the preliminary hearings. So I think that's important, having that technology available in our courtroom. I think we should build on that. It's the future. It's the way it is going, even in light of Crawford v. Washington, in which Scalia announced that, hey, the right to confrontation means what it means. I think technology has definitely put a different spin to that.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills?
So we have a great IT department in the county, and the courtroom looks a lot different. The main Superior Court courtroom looks a lot different than it did when I first started practicing here. Now we got 2 big screens on the wall. We got cameras everywhere. You can see my bald spot if the camera's just right, which always irritates me a little bit. But if you look downstairs, the district courts, or up in Upper County, the district courts have integrated technology into their day-to-day operations better than the Superior Court has at this point. And they've figured it out. They have judges doing the orders, printing the orders. They have e-filing. We have e-filing at Superior Court too for some things. But it can work out. I think the main thrust is to figure out how to do it, how to work with the clerk's office. What do we need to do? And I think there's a lot of efficiency that can be done there. If there's a will, there's a way to do it, even in our old courthouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. I share your disdain for cameras hitting bald spots. Let's go ahead to this and move to our position 2 candidates. We'll start with Mr. Kirkham.
Right, well, one thing that we have to all be aware of is that we can talk about technology and infrastructure, or we can talk about technology and how we utilize it and how we use it. One of the challenges that I've encountered and that has been seen is there's actually a case that came down about attorney access when people are appearing on WebEx or Zoom or one of the other programs. Recently at the trial court judges meeting, we talked about, and I suggested ordering the functional equipment to have interpreters or attorneys be able to talk to clients without court overhearing them or other participants overhearing them, so that they still have that confidentiality. And it's also, we're able to simultaneously have interpreters rather than do consecutive, which means that they have to repeat everything that you say. And those hearings take a lot longer. It improves efficiency, but utilizing the equipment we have, but our IT program is.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Ms. Todd.
This is not going to be a unique problem to today. We're going to continue to have this problem. I have an experience where I was in a 4-month trial in the King County Courthouse, which is outdated in other ways. And in that 4-month trial, there was 4 groups of defense attorneys. There was a plaintiff representing 44 individuals from all over the world. It was a terrible collision that happened, and 5 people had perished. And what was critical in this 4-month trial was we had pre-meetings with the individuals that would be presenting, people that were responsible for recording, the clerk's office, and the judge, and we actually communicated. We looked at each other in the eyes, not emails, not on the phone, but we said, what do you need in the courtroom for it to work? What could we share? We can do the same thing in Kittitas County. We can continue to speak clearly with our stakeholders. We can ask can we cost share, what is appropriate for the county to provide, and how can we deliver the most transparent and fair independent justice for all.
Thank you. So, a couple of you mentioned some of the changes that COVID brought on. Let's dive into that a little bit. Everyone's lives. I would be surprised if there were a person in this community or in this room tonight whose life was not significantly altered by COVID, and some of those changes definitely continue today. Certainly my professional life is dramatically different. The way that I meet with people, the way that I interact with people, etc. COVID allowed people not to be present physically in the courtroom during proceedings. How has this improved or distracted from the efficient operation of the courts? And I believe we're back with our position 2 candidates and Ms. Todd for the first response.
You're right. We had increased technology become an everyday thing. Zoom came in your household, or WebEx, as we went through a difficult time. When we think about how does a court manage that the best way, we need to keep the fundamentals in place. We need to make sure everyone knows the rules. We need to make sure everyone has access. If we're going to provide a link on a website, we need to make sure it's accessible to everyone. The instructions are clear and understood by all the individuals. And there will always be a tendency for there to be distractions. So we need to use our common sense. We need to think about how can we get this accomplished. Judge Juris does some first appearances, arraignments, and other hearings where the jail individual is in a video. Other venues do the same thing. There are some great tools that we have in place that might be able to be expanded in Superior Court, so long as the rules are met, our state constitution's met, and we keep an open mind about how can we continue to use technology in a way that furthers what we're all trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham, your response, please.
Well, I'm actually going to expand a little bit on what Ms. Todd said as far as video appearances. The jail has actually worked with the Superior Court and the judges and the court administrator to set up the ability to do that. And they're going to allow attorneys to be in the room in case they need to have a private conversation to start doing that. So inmates who are currently housed would have to be brought up for hearing, and it'll increase efficiency as well as it takes into consideration, and it's not going to happen on every case, but it takes into consideration some of the safety issues that there are with certain people. But by and large, what I've seen is that more cases are actually handled rather than the driving on suspended person who can't make it to court because his ride's not there and he doesn't have a license and won't show up, will call it or will appear via WebEx. So there's no need for a warrant and delaying the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Let's move to our position 1 candidates, and we'll start this time with your response, Mr. Mills.
It's been a mixed bag, I think. On one hand, it's been great for defendants to be able to avoid traveling an hour for the 30-second hearing, which is fine as long as they've been talking to their attorney. I think for a while, anyway, there was defense attorneys would only see their clients when they showed up to court, which probably wasn't the best way to handle it anyway. I know I was a defense attorney for a while. It's not how I would like to do it, but it happened from time to time. And there are some things you just need to be in court for, status hearings, trials. But I think once we started to figure it out, there's some rules in place about when defense attorneys can appear for their clients, as long as they've talked to them since the last hearing, and things like that. We're getting there. It'll probably improve. But it's probably been a net positive, but there are some drawbacks.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Herion, your response?
The improvement I've observed in civil cases is accessibility. So in termination actions, dependencies, adoptions, guardianships, there's a lot of meetings that go into these cases that are outside the courtroom, persons around the state, and inside the courtroom. And I've noticed, I don't have evidence behind me or a study behind me, but my observation of the last about approximately 9 years, a lot more participation. So that's been a great positive. Certainly first appearances from the jail, perhaps they could appear if there's security concerns. So it's wonderful. Technology is wonderful. The clash comes, I alluded to early, Crawford v. Washington, the right to confrontation. I'm not so certain on criminal cases. Why did everybody come here tonight? You came here because you wanted to see us in person, in the flesh. It would be an entirely different experience if you just read materials and looked online.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Zoom used to be just a simple adjective. Now it means so much more, doesn't it? Okay, let's continue along the vein of administration with another question, and I believe we're back to position 1. So this will go to you first, Mr. Herion. In the fall of 2023, and again in the fall of this year, the court issued defective notices to potential jurors. This suggests that court administration is insufficient in execution. What will you do if elected to see that the court administration is corrected to ensure that this sort of error is not repeated?
As far as juror pools, is that?
Well, it says issued defective notices to potential jurors. So perhaps we could give you like 5 seconds to explain to the audience exactly what that is, and then you can start with the answer.
Yeah. So if jurors, persons in the community didn't receive proper notice, that could impact, whether they show up on time or on a particular day. A lot of the rules governing jurors are already set out. So RCW 2.36, the county draws its pool of potential jurors from Washington State driver's license, ID, and voter registration records, and there's rules governing how we pick jurors. So really, it's, Paul, you're over in Olympia, perhaps. It may be an issue that needs to be looked at the state level, if that in fact is the case. But there are laws governing how pools are drawn.
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
I believe the defective notice, I think they got their summons, but I don't think there was a time or a date to call in, and I can't remember exactly what it was. And yeah, it's a problem if that happens because we need 60 jurors to show up to fill 12 seats, or down in lower district or upper district 30 jurors or so to fill 6 seats. So it's important that it's done right. I doubt this particular mistake will be made again. Maybe some process improvements, some double checking, some quality control might be in order. Look exactly how how those went out. I'm not privy to that information at the moment, but never hurts to have two signatures on a document, on a process to make sure that it's two eyes around it. I think that's probably the best suggestion I have with the information I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. We'll move to our position 2 candidates, and Mr. Kirkham, it's your turn to go first.
And specifically, the problem was that they did not have a date or time to appear. I'm aware of the issue, and my understanding is that it's something to do with the software that randomizes people and sends it out. And I think that the process that has been involved in the court and how that works needs redone. I think that a policy needs to be put in effect that basically will be a way to catch that. My understanding is that it's some sort of software issue or glitch that can happen, but we need to figure that out because that can't happen. We shouldn't have, that's a drain on the system as well. One thing that is apparent, if you look at other courts in the state, we have one court administrator and one assistant court administrator. We should have 7 staff for the judges that we have. Those are the numbers. We're understaffed, but it still shouldn't happen, and processes should be put in place.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Ms. Todd.
2 things I want to make clear. Our court administration works incredibly hard. I believe in their processes, and they do a fantastic job for the county. Second, I'm very protective of county resources, especially as a current county employee. I understood this was also a vendor issue. So we should probably look at our vendor contract, have our civil county attorneys that work in Greg Zempel's prosecutor's office look to make sure that we are making sure we're ensuring that any kind of financial error isn't a hit on the county if it doesn't need to be. That is truly important. And then when it comes to, well, how does this happen in the future? What can we do? Not only do we have this great court administrative staff that is a small staff, but they're mighty. We have a mighty clerk's office. And other jurisdictions, other places, venues as well, they have a court facilitator that can do some of the work that clerks were doing voluntarily. I saw a clerk today who was explaining to someone how to have a no contact order packet and what to fill out. A court facilitator could do that. Our team in the courthouse, judges, court facilitators, and administration, they're all working really hard. You should know they're working hard on your behalf.
Thank you. This is our last administration question. Not our last question, but our last administration question. I've been kind of surprised at how much into the details of administration the audience is, but as I mentioned, they are the experts on this stuff, so thank you for these questions. And I believe we're starting back with position 2, so this will be your chance to answer first. Ms. Todd, what local court rule that currently isn't being enforced would you like to see enforced when you take the bench if elected?
Oh, there are a few. You're going to make me choose one. The most important thing to me is that things are done timely. I want your cases to get resolved. So the most important rule for me is age of the case. Cases should get moved, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. I want to look really carefully at the rule of how old your case has been and why it's being continued. It's one of those situations where it's easy to put off something. I want to see Kittitas County residents be able to resolve their legal problems in an efficient and timely way and move on to the next thing in life. That's really important, to have predictability, to have certainty in your lives. And I'm going to look really carefully at age of case and those rules that are required under the civil rules and the criminal rules of how long your case has been and what we can do to move it along.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkham.
Well, there's actually no rule specifically on caseload length of time, and I think we'd be hard-pressed to institute one because every case is different. Every case requires the amount of time it needs. The rules that currently aren't being followed that I would enforce or attempt to change, and I have to a certain extent, require parties to file or require parties to provide bench copies. I can't tell you how many times we go in and there are no bench copies, and the clerks, because they were filed last minute, haven't scanned them in, and we have to stop the hearing just to get a copy of it, just to read it, just to be better prepared. And judges like to be prepared. I often see Judge Hooper in on Sunday preparing for a docket. I go in either Sunday or early Monday morning or Friday afternoon so that we're not taking up more time trying to get up to speed. We're prepared, able to answer the questions that need answered, and able to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And moving to our position 2 candidates, Mr. Mills, this is your opportunity to answer first.
So there are LCR 6, I believe, is about timing and motions. And I'm not sure how this is being handled on the civil side. I know criminal side get along. The prosecution and the defense bar get along pretty well in this town, which is a good thing, believe it or not. So maybe we're a little bit more laid back about giving each other the motions and dealing with it as it comes. But I do think that probably isn't great for the judge, isn't great for the court. We need to have, if we have a strict 6-day, filing 6 days before, response to 3 days before, I think we should take a look at that. And I would definitely think that that needs to be done in civil practice as well. That's the one that stands out to me.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And finally, Mr. Herion.
I think we're all talking about the same thing. Time, certainly. Criminal rules, though, are governed by speedy trial rules. And those are bent, and the person accused has a right to wait, the right to trial, to be prepared. So it can be challenging. On the civil side, removing a child from a home, I've seen cases linger for years, and it's heartbreaking. So it's back to setting a tone, the tone the judge wants. I agree with my colleague. If you make a motion, you file the motion in writing, and that includes accompanying it with a legal memo. And that will prevent attorneys from stepping up on the floor with oh, Judge, I have one more thing I'd like to bring up. File your motion, file your memo, and note it up for a hearing. And that will cut down on a lot of matters.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Okay, setting administrative matters aside, it's January 2nd. It's not, right? It's not January 2nd, but pretend it's January 2nd. Election was over on the 5th. You got the most votes for your position. You're sworn in as judge. Reality sets in because you now have a trial. And it's not a minor trial. It's a young person accused of first-degree murder. How would you approach the sentencing process if a conviction is reached in such a case? I believe we're with position 1 and Mr. Herion answering first.
And the question is, how do I approach the what?
The sentencing process in the case of a conviction.
Yes. So, first of all, I believe the first day on the job is Monday, January 13th. I have heard it starts at 12:01. So if an officer calls in, requests a review for a warrant, whoever's elected and draws the short straw will be reviewing that warrant. But after the warrant's reviewed, going to work at 8 o'clock, perhaps earlier, it's governed by law. It's governed by law. We have a system in place. Been in place since 1983, Sentence Reform Act, and you follow the law. If there's discretion in sentencing, then the parties will present their respective sides as to what each side feels the sentence the judge should order, and the judge will make the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a sentencing guidelines. Basically, for a felony case, you add up, there's a worksheet you fill out, how many felonies does this person have, what kind of felonies were they. You come to a score, and the score gives you a range of months to sentence someone to, and I guess most of your discretion as a judge is in that range of months. So in order to decide what to do there, you listen to the parties, listen to if sometimes there's a pre-sentence investigation, listen to the victims, listen to the arguments from attorneys, and decide where you're going to use that discretion that the legislature has given you and come to a sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Our position 2 candidates, and I believe Mr. Kirkham, you have the first opportunity.
Well, it really depends on more than you've given us. That charge, if there was a conviction, would require a mandatory PSI, which pre-sentence report that the Department of Corrections would do, interviewing family members, getting history, providing guidance to the court, and also making a recommendation. So I would do what I would do in any other case, which is get the recommendations from all the stakeholders and then decide which recommendation I should go with the best, given what job I'm there to do and what guidance the SRA gives us. I can tell you that I've been in a position overseeing a juvenile trial, happened to make a decision on guilt and innocence, not like that case because we'd have a jury. But then I had to do sentencing, and the first thing I did was said, I want to do the right thing, and I took time to do it. That's what I did.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Ms. Todd, your response.
So to approach sentencing, you need to take a top to bottom look at things. You need to start with how did the case start, looking at how it was charged, reflecting on the motions that were heard before, and then looking at the trial, what happened during the trial, because what you're doing is you're upholding the juror's decision. 12 people unanimously said that person was guilty. And so you're looking at everything that's come before you. Sentencing recommendations made by the prosecutor, by the defense attorney, the victim gets to share their perspective, the defendant gets to share their perspective. A judge is going to take all the information. You heard about the pre-sentence investigative report. You're going to look at that before you take the bench. You're going to look very carefully at this case, the whole case. This is a significant decision. This is what you trust your judges to do. And what you need is a hardworking judge who will be willing to look at it from top to bottom as a good public servant would.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Okay, switching gears again. So kind of a philosophical question. This one also comes from the audience, as the previous ones have. What is your position on the U.S. Constitution as a living document? And I believe we'll start with position 2 and Ms. Todd.
The U.S. Constitution as a living document is something that I hear lots of definitions about. What does it mean to be a living document? It is written down. I've seen a copy in the Smithsonian. I'm in awe of our law. I'm in awe of our founding fathers putting together something that we still use and look at today. As a Superior Court judge, I'm going to be very careful about our state constitution, our state laws, and when there are elements of federal law that come into my courthouse, I'm going to be very careful to make sure that I read up on areas that I don't know about. I'm going to ask the advocates, I need more information about this area of law. This isn't something I normally would see in a court. Those are the things I'm going to take together. It's a living document in terms of we're all living. We've progressed and developed as a country in the years it existed. It's written down for a reason, and wonderful people have interpreted it, and that will keep being interpreted by wonderful attorneys.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkham?
I think that we've got a lot going on in that question. Laws are basically society saying we want protection, we want society to act the way that we want society to act, and at the time the Constitution was a reflection of that. I think the Constitution as a living document is still a reflection of that, and that's why we have over the years different decisions that seem to contradict themselves when the Supreme Court makes a decision that alters precedent. And we also have two constitutions, the state constitution and the national constitution. I've been licensed state and federally for 20 years, and I've dealt in both arenas. Washington is much more protective of privacy rights than the U.S. Constitution. That's because it's a reflection of Washington citizens wanting to make sure that the government doesn't intrude on your privacy. I'm out.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Mr. Mills, same question.
Well, it's an amazing document. Right before I started this job, we took a tour of the East Coast, and one of the coolest places we stopped in was James Madison's house. And standing in the bedroom where chambers where he actually sat down and wrote out the Constitution was just kind of blew me away. So I think that the Constitution has been interpreted every which way from possible since the very first Supreme Court was set. And the reality of the situation for a trial court judge is we're told what the Constitution means by the Supreme Court, by the appellate court, same with the Washington Constitution, by the Washington Supreme Court, the Washington appellate court. If we do happen to get some kind of first impression of a constitutional issue, you better believe the appellate court's going to tell us what they thought of that really quick, because it's going to go right up the line. But it's an amazing document, and it's survived this long because it's how it's written.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Herion.
It's such an amazing document that I brought it. And this is from the 107th Congress. So I purchased this at the U.S. Supreme Court after 9/11. This is not the one I open up. I have my card in here. But I was a new attorney. I wanted to get something, some token. Went into the Supreme Court shop, gift shop, and bought this book. I have my working copy, and it's truly the basis of everything, criminal law, civil law. And I will tell you, from a military perspective, everything flows from this. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, our state constitution, all flows from it. And what's amazing is look how thin it is. Look how thin it is. And they put this together. So I certainly believe in it. As my colleague said, case law flows from it. It's quoted from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Okay, well, you've reached a pivotal moment. We have one last question. This is the last card that I have. Don't go anywhere. We still got final statements and things like that. This is a personal question. And I believe we're going to start with you, Mr. Herion, for position one. Who influenced you in your career, and what have you learned from that person?
Yeah, a lot of people have influenced me in my career. It started with my family. My father's a career military officer. He's a Washington native, born in Yakima, raised in Kittitas. Went in the military, stayed in the military after Vietnam. Moving on, Marine Corps, non-commissioned officers, huge influence, particularly drill instructor, some senior Army officers. In Benton County, Judge Dennis Jewell, I recall him saying that the challenge of this work is being your best when people are at their worst. Judge Mike Cooper, Judge Candace Hooper, only departed Judge Francis Chmielewski. I took the job to become a special assistant attorney general. She encouraged me. It was a great mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herion. Mr. Mills, your influencers.
In my legal career, it's been wide. It's been the attorneys, the older attorneys, and when I became attorney, it was my second career, so I was already 33 by the time I started working. But I did still have older attorneys taking the time to guide me. Bill Broad was the first attorney I worked for in Silverdale, and he was a good old boy in Kitsap County, more or less. And, he took the time to teach me how to go into court, how to argue a case. The very first time, right after I got licensed, he went in and said, come with me and watch this argument. And I got there and he handed me the briefing and said, actually, you're arguing it, which was interesting. And then, folks like examples of service like Mr. Zempel over there, or some of our judges, Judge Sparks, some of our judges that I was close with in Kitsap County, Judge Spearman, were big influences.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And let's move to our position 2 candidates, and we'll start this round with Mr. Kirkham.
Probably who has influenced my legal career the most is someone who doesn't have a law degree. It's my wife. I wouldn't have went over to Gonzaga without her support. I wouldn't have went over to start up a practice after I graduated without her support. We wouldn't be back in Ellensburg having a law firm and be running for judge without her support. Aside from that, there's numerous judges, numerous people who have influenced me. John Clark, may he rest in peace, and his wife Ellen Clark, who was a retired Superior Court judge from Spokane, were instrumental initially in influencing me. Retired attorney Ken Beckley, both the current sitting Superior Court judges, Candace Hooper as well as Scott Sparks, who I'm proud to call friends. And they have influenced my decision to run greatly, as well as been, especially Judge Sparks has been very supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. And finally, Ms. Todd.
I want to mention 3 people that have influenced me heavily in my career. The first was my mentor, senior counsel, Steve Puz. We worked on big cases. We took cases to the state Supreme Court, and to me, it was like the best legal holiday. I couldn't get enough. I was able to prepare legal arguments. He treated it like a partnership, and I will be forever grateful for having the opportunities that were invested in me. Another person that I am incredibly grateful to is Judge Hooper. I've been in front of her 3 days a week, pretty much steadily for the last year, and I've seen an incredible public servant who works round the clock with an even temperament, works to find the right answer. And it is incredible how much work she does. It's truly astounding. And lastly, I'm influenced by everyone I'm in front of. We are all a product of our environment, and I've been blessed to be in front of wonderful attorneys, and I get to work with Greg Zempel, who's taught me to have the highest ethical standards.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've reached the conclusion of all of the questions this evening. We're going to end tonight with an opportunity for the candidates to give a 60-second closing statement. We started all the way back at 6 o'clock, believe it or not. You guys are champions. You've been sitting in those chairs for almost 2 hours now, and I want to remind you, I gave you an opportunity for a hokey pokey stretch. You didn't take it, so you're gonna have to suffer through to the end at this point. So let's go ahead and start with Ms. Todd again for a 60-second opening statement, and then we'll go right down the line. Or I'm sorry, closing statement, not opening statement. Sorry.
I want you to have the best, highest caliber judge candidate serving as your Superior Court judge. I bring to you 15 years of the most complex civil cases. I bring to you a dedication. I want you to have the best public servant who is willing to do hard work. I bring to you 16 years and counting as being a public servant working for you. And I also want you to have someone in your judge who has vast civil and criminal procedural knowledge. It is very important that our judges are able to make the right rulings with the rules. No one wants to see a court decision changed and resources be spent when the rule wasn't followed. I want you to have a judge who has that vast experience. I bring you all of those 3 things, and I bring you the heart of a public servant. I very much want to serve our community, and this has been my incredible honor to speak directly to you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. Mr. Kirkham?
Thank you. First off, thank you for the League of Women Voters as well as Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. What to say in closing? I've been in town basically all my life, except for living over in Spokane, practicing for a few years. I'm invested in this community. This community is invested in me. I have the support of numerous stakeholders in the community, include Judge Sparks, who's endorsed me, his wife Dawn, who's endorsed me, Craig Jarris, sitting judge in Upper District Court, who's endorsed me, retired Judge Ellis, who's endorsed me, Rick Cole, Jim Dennison, Christopher Bridger, numerous other attorneys and judges and people in this great county think that I'm the one for the job, and I think I am too. I've had 18 months of experience. You can go on jameskirkham.org, it should be updated tonight, with all the endorsements.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkham. Mr. Mills.
Oh, thanks again for hanging in there with us tonight. This is a pivotal time for Kittitas County's judicial needs. Obviously we're growing. We need a candidate with the right temperament, the right experience, the right desire to serve. If I'm elected, I'm going to be the judge. That's going to be my job. That's going to be my only job. I'm not going to be going to school. I'm not going to have another job. It's going to be a big job, especially the first 12 to 18 months. It's going to take a lot of time, and we've seen what happens in this county when we have judges that, for whatever reason, are indisposed. It creates a big problem. It slows things down. I just want to mention some of the endorsements I have. People have worked with both me and my opponent, Greg Zempel. Our previous opponent, Margie Alabon, Ben Beckley. I also have Upper District Court Judge Juris, all 5 mayors of the county, Mark Dark, who is the Cle Elum prosecuting attorney. Just ask for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Finally, Mr. Herion, your closing statement.
21 days, you will choose your next two. You will. And they'll chart your county's legal chapter, the next one. My 24 years of legal practice anchored by 16 years serviced our county prosecuting some of this county's toughest criminal cases and cases involving our children. This includes 17 years as a judge advocate general. Your Superior Court judge is the center of gravity at the county courthouse, presiding over the day-to-day functions. Your Superior Court judge must not only have the knowledge, education, experience, training, and skill, but the life experience. At each stage of my life, as I've stated, I understand the importance of being a Marine, an Army officer, son, father, husband, 24 years. And I'll treat the position the same. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our candidates, all of you, for joining us this evening. I can tell you that putting your name up for election, deciding to run for an elected office is not a small decision. It's not something that's taken lightly, at least it shouldn't be. It's a major sacrifice for each of these individuals that have put themselves forward for your consideration today. It's a major sacrifice, not just for them, but for their family and for their friends, and really for everyone who's around them. Each of you deserves our gratitude and our respect simply for running. Please join me in thanking these candidates this evening. Finally, I also want to thank the candidates for your conduct this evening. I think this was very refreshing as moderator to see that civil discourse is not only possible in the United States of America in today's world, but it's alive and well right here in Kittitas County. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank the audience for being here tonight. Thanks for taking the time, maybe delaying dinner or having an early dinner or giving up maybe your favorite TV show to be with us this evening. It's really important that you're here in person and that you're here in the audience. I think the judges candidates oftentimes are one of those spots on the ballot that get overlooked. So your involvement in taking a little deeper dive into this issue, into this position, and trying to understand these candidates a little bit more says a lot about you as a citizen and about your commitment to the election process. I also want to thank those who are viewing this at home. I'm sure it will run many times, so hopefully folks will get lots of opportunity to view this between now and Election Day. Election Day is 3 weeks away, literally 3 weeks from tonight. Ballots are on the way. Your voter's pamphlet is in the mail, both the state and the local pamphlet. There are critical decisions that are going to be made on November 5th, and each of you has the power to influence those decisions. So please get out there and vote, encourage others to vote, and have a great evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.